So, Culture and Conversations family, this is the first episode of The Sit Down. The Sit Down is going to be the video content for the podcast where I have people over to my house and we sit down and talk. And the first question I got asked when I started this podcast, about around episode 19, 20, 21, 22, I think it's 23 actually, 23, by Brandy Thomas was, when would I let someone help me tell my story? So who better to have over for the first episode of the Sit Down than Brandy? So
hey, I'm so excited to be doing this. I hope you're very excited.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited. So
I'm gonna be asking all those hard-hitting questions. We don't have the Kleenex. You might need them, but just use your sleeve.
I hope I don't cry.
Oprah and Barbara Walters, they're my inspiration.
Cool. Cool. So have at me.
Fantastic. Awesome. Okay, so before we get to Jamison today, I want to know about what went into making Jamison the man.
Okay.
So I happen to know.
Okay.
You're from Morven.
I'm from Morven, Georgia, yes.
You're from Morven, Georgia. Tell me about Morven, Georgia when Jamison was growing up. What would I see? What would I be doing?
So Morven is a small town in South Georgia. We farm mostly for a living. Everybody in the area farms on some level. But me growing up, my father was a carpenter, and my mother, she worked in the school system. And so I was a kid running around in a little town trying to stay out of trouble. So me and all my friends that I grew up with, we did all kind of things. We rode bicycles. We played in different unsafe areas because we were boys, and that's what boys did. Thankfully, I have all my fingers and toes, and I didn't lose an eye because you know how it is, right? Black mothers would always say, "Be careful, boy, you're gonna put your eye out." So, didn't put my eye out, and learned how to work hard growing up in that area because that's all the type of work there was. There was hard work. We didn't have a lot, but there was a lot of love there in the household, 2-parent household. Parents are still married. Yeah, so they're coming up on number 50 in a couple of years. So, yeah.
Incredible. What about high school, Jamison? Like, what was your guilty pleasure in high school?
So, I think for me, you asked me kind of what went into me, so I want to finish paying that off and then kind of talk about high school, Jamison. I got bullied growing up. I got picked on. So I was different. You know how that is. If you're not like everybody else, then that gives them something to poke at. Mm-hmm. So I had to learn how to deal with people and how to be myself in the world. And that wasn't easy. That was tough. A lot of those experiences and those different moments still sort of help shape me today. Mm-hmm. So high school Jamison still hadn't figured out exactly how to be himself yet. He was still growing in that area. I was still developing that sense of who I was. So did I have any guilty pleasures? Not really. I gotta be honest. I was kind of lame in high school by most kids' standards.
So high school Jamison, senior in high school, he never snuck out of the house. He didn't borrow his parents' car. He didn't. Really?
No.
You were wholesome. I love it.
Yeah, I didn't get into trouble in high school, any of that. The worst happened was I got a speeding ticket with my brother. My brother was actually the one who got the speeding ticket, but I was in the car with him.
So you were an accessory.
I was. We were going to something for school where I had an awards night or something like that, and I had to go down, and he was driving because he wanted to drive, and you know how that is, and we were just going too fast and got a speeding ticket. So that's the worst of it.
Okay, just because you didn't get caught doesn't mean that you weren't into some mischief.
I'm telling you, I was really boring.
I need to find some of these high school kids because I feel like I'm not getting the whole story here.
No, I was boring.
We'll go with that.
I was really boring.
Okay. Well, what clubs were you in? I'm sure you were involved in something.
So I was on the math team in high school. Wasn't really good as I needed to be on that level of math. I was just better at math than most people, but not everyone. Mm-hmm. I also was involved with FFA, Future Farmers of America. So that was really cool though, because you learn a lot of practical things with being a farmer.
Okay.
Because you have to work with your hands. You got to deal with producing food. You got to deal with animal husbandry, all that stuff. Keep taking care of the livestock, and there was always something tangible at the end of it. I still use a lot of stuff I learned in the FFA class with
Okay.
in my life now. Like
Okay.
I can wire up stuff because of that, because of the stuff I got exposed to, and like literally do electrical work.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know why that surprises me, but it does. Okay.
So,
Fantastic. Okay, so I know that we met at Georgia Southern,
yeah.
where we both attended undergrad. When you were leaving Morven, did you have any, final thoughts? Like, okay, goodbye, Morven. Like, what was your swan song before you left Morven to head to Georgia Southern?
We grew up. I grew up somewhat resentful of being poor, and I didn't understand all of what went into us being poor. Now, don't get me wrong. There's different levels of poor, just like there's different levels of wealth. So we didn't have lights and stuff cut off, and we weren't going around, without food and clothes and stuff like that. But the way I always describe how I grew up, there was no extra. And that really bothered me because I didn't understand how hard life was. So I kind of left home hoping that the journey through Georgia Southern, through education, would give me a chance to build my life so that I could have what I thought was, quote unquote, more. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I left. And then also, too, because I was lame in high school, I got a chance to, go to Georgia Southern and reinvent myself, or at least discover who I was, finish that discovery process. And while I would like to say that I got outside of my shell at Georgia Southern, which to some extent I did, I feel like I did turn into a bit of a butterfly at Georgia Southern finally. I still was pretty lame in college. And
I think that's relative. I wouldn't say you were lame, but I think everybody has their lane.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's it. That was at least my perception of myself. I didn't feel like I was still a cool kid. I didn't feel like I was in the cool kid crowd at Georgia Southern. Even though I felt like when people got to know me, they were like, "Oh, he's a funny guy. He's a little quirky because he's a bit of a nerd, but I'm funny. So and different, and I have a perspective, and that I developed a lot at Georgia Southern. Okay. It came together.
So when you entered Georgia Southern, did you have an idea of what your major would be or who you would be, and did that sort of shift at all?
That's a good question. So I came into Southern with this simple plan for what I was going to major in. If I got to Georgia Tech, which didn't happen, I was going to be a computer engineer because that's an engineering school.
Right.
That was all the logic there was to it. I knew I was good with computers, quote unquote, and I wanted to do something in computers, quote unquote. So then I was like, if I go to engineering school, I'm doing computer engineering. If I go to Southern, I'm going to do computer science because Georgia Southern's not an engineering school. That was my logic. Okay. And it was by happenstance, providence, divine predestination that I got into a class, and that class actually was using a programming language I had got exposed to during my summer, one of my summers in high school. And when that happened, I just took to it like a fish in water. I said, I can do this. I got all the concepts, I understood it, and I was really ahead of everybody in the class because I had programmed before in that language. So I had the opportunity to just kind of learning and being immersed in it, and it became what I wanted to do. So I majored in computer science and graduated with a computer science degree in 4 years.
So is there anything about your time at Georgia Southern that you wish you had done differently, or you could go back and get a redo?
Oh, I think I would have taken another year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Because I rushed through college. I kind of bought into this idea that, okay, I got it in 4 years. There's no rule that says you have to get out of college in 4 years. But I made that up because it just sounded like what you had to do, 4 years in college. Because you hear that all the time, 4 years in college, 4 years in college. And I should have just taken another year to enjoy it. You know, yeah, I met a lot of amazing people, a lot of wonderful friends and colleagues and connections and just experiences and professors. And I was in an environment where I could literally blossom into anything. And here I was just kind of rushing through it to become a graduate, not so much with a end destination in mind, but I just wanted to get done with it. Oh, just get it checked off. And no, college is just great formative time in your life, and you should experience it, I think. So for me, I wish I could have just taken longer.
What do you feel like you didn't have enough time for? Like, why would that extra year have made a difference?
I think I would have just appreciated the people. It would have given me a chance to build more relationships. It would have given me a chance to also just enjoy not having the responsibilities of being an adult. And I didn't appreciate that. You know, even though school is challenging in its own right, it's still not the hardest thing I've had to deal with in my life. You know, at the time I thought it was, but you know, life has a way of showing you that there's more difficult things down the road if you just keep on living, as they would say. So,
So I know that you and I both were McNair scholars,
okay, yeah.
and that was a fantastic trip. I think it was a great experience in general.
Hmm.
How do you think that helped you in your career at Georgia Southern or even post graduation?
That's a good question. I think for me, it came back to help me understand that there just weren't a lot of people like me doing what it is I do, because that was part of the charge of the McNair program, was to develop minorities academically so that they could get penetration into these different levels of higher education, like doctorate work and stuff like that. So they were trying to cultivate PhDs from the minorities by giving us that extra nurturing, that extra love, that extra focus, helping us solve a lot of these systemic problems through education and through the preparatory work. And also that puts you on the radar for the universities. So I think what it taught me was just to begin to look at myself in the bigger picture, just how, I don't want to say how special I was, but how rare I am, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because rare doesn't necessarily mean special.
I think you're special.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. At least somebody thinks I'm special. Yeah, we're keeping that one in. Yes, yes. But no, I think it's just you. I think you have to understand your place in the world, and that kind of helped me figure it out, or begin to see a little bit of it. That hey, this is going to be not necessarily an uphill battle, but I'm going to be different, and everybody's going to know that I'm different because I do stick out. I'm a giant black guy who programs for a living, so when I walk in interviews, that catches people's eye. When I'm on the team, that's going to stand out. When um, I go and just do the work, and I talk to people about what I do, and it helped me realize how rare that is. Um, Also, too, the academic rigor was cool. Writing that paper we had to write,
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, and also presenting it was good because I think it gave me a chance of learning how to communicate really technical stuff in a more approachable format for people. And that's something that is a skill that I have to use all the time. How do you communicate these technical concepts, these abstract things that live inside of a computer? How do you communicate that? And at the same time, accomplish your goal of getting people to buy into your ideas, to believe that you're credible when you present these things. How do you do all of that? And McNair was the first taste I had of that. Also with the college work I did, obviously, but it gave me that perspective on learning the importance of communication. Also understanding, like I said, my place in the world, how rare I am, but at the same time embracing that opportunity of being different and that I can be successful even though I am different.
Okay. So, every senior who's getting ready to graduate from college, they have this idea of, okay, this is the job that I'm going to do.
Hmm.
This is the money I'm going to be making.
Sure.
How did that line up for you?
Oh, so my first job out of college, I did retail work, selling computers and TVs at Best Buy. One of the things I'll tell anybody is that if you can get the experience of selling stuff, really good experience to get, especially if it's face-to-face sales where you're actually having to talk to people. That's really good. So part of that maturation process for me of developing a personality came in part with me having to talk to random strangers while standing on my feet 8 hours a day selling TVs and computers. And that actually led me into a moment in my life that was one of those formative moments. But I guess we can talk about that later.
No, let's hit it.
All right, so let me answer your question about the money and all that stuff. So it worked out. I mean, working at Best Buy was making $8.25 an hour, I believe.
Was that a shock for you? I have a degree, and I'm making $8.25.
You know what? This is the weird part. It wasn't, because even though I had a computer science degree, and this is gonna sound, I know it's gonna blow people's minds. Even though I had a computer science degree, I actually had a time where I considered not using it at all.
What?
Yeah.
Why and how and what? What? Yes.
Because
I'm shocked. Okay, let me get myself together here.
Because I didn't have an on ramp. Coming out of college, I didn't have that ready-made opportunity for me to go and do software development. So I was like, okay, I've been through 4 years of education. I've got this experience doing, computer programming. What does that look like in my life? How am I going to, do this work? And how am I going to get started doing this work? So I didn't have a plan. And I think that's my fault. I have to take ownership of that. But at the same time, too, the job market was really crazy in 2005, 2006, because we had just come out of the tech bubble popping. So companies were very skittish about how they were spending technology money in their budgets. But I didn't feel that until I really started applying for jobs. But I came out of college, like I said, and didn't have a plan. So I said, well, I'll just figure it out. I'll go back home to Morven, take some time out, figure it out. And I went, and part of doing that, that's when I got the job at Best Buy. Because you got to pay back them student loans, because they ain't going to give you time to figure out nothing.
Defer.
Yeah. And I did that for a couple of months, and then deferred. Then I got the job, and I started paying it back. And yeah, because I mean, my goal was only to make. I felt like I could live a good life if I made $50,000 a year.
Okay.
So I felt like I could live a good life doing that. $8.25 is far from that, especially if you're not even full time. So, I felt like I just had to kind of start somewhere. And I was going to figure it out. And so it didn't bother me. My ego with the whole having a degree and then having a retail job. I knew it would happen at one point. I knew this was a bullet in my, in my arsenal that I just had to fire one day, and then it would hit something, and I just had to find the right target, a target that would be approachable with my degree, my level of experience and my degree. And I just hadn't found that yet. So I never forget, I was selling. Matter of fact, I was selling. I know exactly what I was doing. I was selling DVD burners, because that was the big thing at the time. Instead of having like a VCR, you had like a DVD that was like you could burn to, that you could record your shows with. And this guy comes in, him and his wife, older couple, looked like they were early retirees, And he starts asking me about these DVD recorders, and I said, well, this is the best one. This is good, and this is okay. And I'm trying to kind of fill them out, because you got to kind of feel, do I need to lead you to the one that's more expensive, or do I need to give you the one that's a little cheaper? And in that process, I asked him, say, man, so if you don't mind me asking, I love talking to people, getting to know people. What do you do for a living? What did you do for a living? He said, oh, everything I worked on, he sent into space. I said, excuse me? I'm in Valdosta, Georgia, and this guy talking about he sent stuff into space. I stopped everything. I was like, man, we'll figure out the DVD player thing. Tell me about this, you sending stuff into space. And Brandon, he worked for NASA. And the part that was amazing to me was he went back to school. I think he said he took night classes to get a PhD in astrophysics in his spare time.
Yeah.
After he was working like as a janitor, he got tired of that. He went back to school and did night courses to get his PhD in astrophysics. And this guy was talking to me about it. And I mean, at first, and when he said that, I said, okay, it sounds too good to be true. And then he started talking to me about the differences in how your gas miles, when you go east to west versus going west to east, and it has something to do with the rotation of the earth. I said, okay, I get it. You're qualified. he was retired, and he was doing consulting 1 weekend a month, making 70% of his salary from NASA. And this guy walks into the Best Buy, and I just blown. My mind was blown. But he said something to me the second time I saw him when he came back to pick up the thing that I sold him, because I think we had to order it. He said, "I hope." I was telling my wife, "I hope that guy doesn't settle." And it was like the voice of God at that point.
Did the light shine down from heaven?
It felt that way. It really did. It was like I just sat there for a moment, and my whole world was shattered. I was like, yeah, what is that? Where in the hell am I? What am I doing here? You know.
So did you have a Jerry Maguire moment? I'm going. Who's going with me? Or did you, try to figure out your next steps? Did it take you a little longer than I'm leaving? Bye.
So I never forget. Two things happened that gave me more of a boost. I was already thinking like, okay, strategically, what I got to do to get out of here. I got to find an entry-level job. That's the problem to solve. I got to find an entry-level technology job where I can put this degree to use. And what happened was, I never forget, I had one of my managers come by and, just say some really ignorant stuff to me about how I was performing in my job. And I thought to myself, why am I putting up with this? And then I had another customer walk in who was arguing with me about the specification of a computer, about how much RAM was in the computer. And he was telling me I was wrong. And I thought to myself, I sat in a class where we actually learned how this is built from scratch. Why am I sitting up here arguing with you about this? Taking your insults? So when that happened, I got up and decided to start applying for entry-level jobs. I applied for a job in Americus, Georgia. And it was going to be in a call center doing technical support in a call center. And then I had a buddy in Hilton Head, South Carolina, who was working at a small web development, web marketing company that was building websites for companies in the area, hospitality websites and stuff like that. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, you want to come up and, interview for the job?" And I remember driving to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and interviewed with them, got the job, and moved up there. And I didn't have enough money from the job I was took because it was truly entry level. I mean, they were paying me very low, but I kept my job at Best Buy and had it transferred to Savannah. And I was actually working in Savannah on the weekends and working in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So I was working like 60 hours a week. So that I always tell people I was working 60 hours so that I could get those 40 hours a week worth of experience.
That is great. How much of a drive was that for you? So were you living in Hilton Head?
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to drive? I don't know.
It would take about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic, to drive from Hilton Head down to Savannah and from Savannah to Hilton Head.
Do you think if you had a mentor in college or right after college that it may have made things a little easier for you? Because you said you didn't have an on-ramp. So do you think that piece might have helped you, or did you have a mentor?
No, I didn't really have a mentor. I think what I should have done was I should have done some internships. I should have applied for more internships when I was in college. I don't think I applied for any internships. I think I just was being a lazy college student, really, truth be told. So, I mean, it could have made it easier, but, I'm really happy with the journey because I think it made me hungry to go through that. It made me appreciative, and it made me realize that life isn't easy yet again, but I got my first job. So what happened was the company in South Carolina, they started having hiccups because they're such a small company. And then the company, started having trouble. So I moved back home. The buddy I moved up there working with, he got a job in Atlanta. So I moved back home. And then I said, okay, well, I solved the problem. I got some experience. I got 7 months of experience programming, professionally. That's still not a lot because they want you to at least, having 2 or 3 years worth of experience to get an entry-level job. So I said, well, the only thing we can do is go back to square one, start applying for jobs, start sitting out the resumes again. And I was home for maybe 2 weeks, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, I said, man, I still haven't left Morven. I'm back in Morven. And I got a phone call from a company in Norcross who does logistics work, or did, they still do it, but they've been bought and changed names and stuff. And I never forget, the guy talked to me on the phone for about 30 minutes, and he said, we'd like to get you in here for an interview. He said, when can you come to Atlanta? I never forget, it was a Tuesday. I told him I can't be there tomorrow, but I can be there Thursday. So I was like, I dropped everything I had going on, which was nothing, and hopped in the car and drove up to Norcross and drove through a crazy rainstorm. It was my first time ever driving to Atlanta, because that's a big deal for people who don't live in Atlanta, like driving to Atlanta for the first time.
It is a huge deal, yeah.
It's like, what, all that traffic? Survived that. And my mom was in the car with me because she was scared I was going to die on the highway. That boy going to go up that road. Yeah, I could hear them talking,
Oh, mama.
And I didn't even think she was going with me, but when I got ready to leave, she was ready to go. And so I said, all right. So,
I love it.
yeah, literally, she was like, because she asked me, how you get to Atlanta? I said, I'm going to drive. Like, I'm going to get there, And so I drove to Atlanta, and actually it was Tucker, and got off the highway and drove through the craziest rainstorm getting up here. It was insane.
How hard was she praying?
She was asleep most of the way. She was asleep after like the first 40 minutes on the road, like just out. I said, you might as well stay at home. You should sleep. But she woke up and she kept me good company. And, I had an interview and we were coming back. So she said, how was it? And I never forget, I told her, I said, well, I had a good interview. I think I did. I said, but I've been down this path before too, where, I have a good interview and somebody else with more experience comes along and they want to hire them because they can pay them the same thing they pay me, but with, more experience. And my mom said something, I never forget. She said, what God has for you is for you.
And amen.
I was like, well, it's a faith growing moment, because for me, I'm sitting there like, yeah, okay, I believe that. I really do, but I haven't experienced it yet. Yeah, like it hadn't connected with me yet. And, I like literally 30 minutes or 40 minutes later, I got a phone call. And the director who was in charge of HR, she said that the interview went extremely well and that they anticipated making a decision shortly. So that's kind of code speak in the industry for, hey, you got the job, just don't.
We're going to call you. Don't take no other position.
That's it. Don't do nothing else. Don't do nothing else.
Just pause.
Just like are you currently interviewing other places? No. All right, then chill. We gonna handle some things. And they called me. I went, but I didn't stop. I was going back to get my job back at Best Buy. And I was in the parking lot at the Best Buy store. My phone rang, and it was my new boss calling me, telling me I got the job.
Look at God.
Yeah. And they gave me money to relocate with.
Yes, for the relocation fund.
Yeah. But it still wasn't enough. So I had to go borrow money to do this with. So I went to the bank, took out an unsecured loan, like 25% interest, APR.
It's that starting point.
Look, I just needed an on-ramp. And I didn't care how it looked to anybody, me doing it. I had to make it happen. And I slept on the floor. I had no furniture in my apartment. Apartment was full of roaches when I moved into it. So I fought the roaches because they weren't paying rent. I was. And I slept on the floor. I had a big air mattress, folding chair for my furniture. Had a box that my pots and pans came in, and I had a cooking sheet, and I used that as my table. That's what I ate off of.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've come a long way,
James. Like God has been good, man. Yeah, I am, a lot. I put it this way, the progression. I don't know what anybody else's journey looks like. I didn't live their journey. I lived mine, and I can see moments where. I can just see God doing things to pointing like, hey, this is it, and so, got that first job, spent 1.5 years there, and then got another job, and then spent 3 years there, and just kept on kind of going, because now we're in an economy where you don't really put down roots. You just, unless you have a great company that you work at, that, where you can have that longevity, but, that's kind of what happened, so.
Okay. So I know you've come a long way since that job and that first apartment,
Mhm.
but sometimes I feel like you're a bit like Tommy from Martin.
I ain't got no job.
You ain't got no job, man. So, but I know you have multiple things that you're working on. So,
Okay.
what are you doing, James?
What do I do?
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yes, please tell the
Okay.
people.
What do I
Specifically
do?
me.
Specifically you. I got you. So, so I have a job.
Yes.
I have a job. I do.
Good to know.
So what I do is I'm a software engineer. That's what I do.
You made it.
I made it. I made it. Been doing that now for over. Got first job in March 2006, and here we are now in 2018. So yeah, I've been doing it now for over 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I'll be 13 coming up on next March. So I always celebrate that in my head because it's like a big deal because I remember how hard it was getting that first job. And so I'm a software engineer. That's what I do. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So how did computer engineering segue into podcasting and now, this vlogging? Because I think that's what the kids call it.
The
Do
vlogging.
The videos. Vlogging.
Yeah. I think it really comes out of the church work.
Okay.
So I moved to Atlanta, didn't have a church home, and it really didn't bother me. I just kind of was enjoying not having anything to do on Sundays, But there's a piece of my life that I knew wasn't right spiritually because living like that, you have things that you become acutely aware of that need to be corrected in your life. And given, as we were saying in South Georgia, giving the Lord some of your time, that's part of it. It helps you center you and help you put your life in perspective. So I found a church home, and so they didn't have a Sunday school teacher, at least not a consistent one. And when the pastor of the church, who had just got to the church himself, asked me to teach Sunday school, I had experience teaching and Bible studies and stuff, so I said, sure, I'll do it.
Really?
Yeah. And it was a process of becoming not only engaging, but being more vulnerable. Because you can't point out people's flaws without addressing your own. And the best way to point out somebody else's flaw is to show the flaw in yourself. Jesus has a way of saying it. Before I point at the speck in your eye, I need to look at that plank in mine. Roughly paraphrasing that, the Jamison Smallwood version of the Bible. And so I used that technique to teach. And what happened was I became more and more open and transparent about my life to the point where I was just telling these stories and just communicating this experience of my life to these people to try to help them understand these biblical concepts. The shortcomings, the highs, the lows, the successes, the testimonies, the things I fell at, things that I would normally be embarrassed to share. It just all became very open and transparent. And I realized I'm telling these stories about my life, and I'm doing it in front of these people without any reservation, without any,
That's brave.
Yeah, without any thought like to my reputation or anything. Like I'm just telling these people these stories, and I think that gave me the experience of being vulnerable. So fast forward, you ask how does that come about? So I think that's the on-ramp to that part of the podcast, the vulnerability. But then there's the Facebook stuff where I'm on Facebook and I have a social media presence. It's not like a huge following, but I have my friends and family, some people I have acquaintance with or whatever who follow me on Facebook. And I just, I have a sense of humor and I have a way of being a bit provocative and stirring the pot and making people think about things and getting people to engage posts. And I think I understand that psychology of it a little bit, so I can, manipulate those triggers and those switches in people. So people start telling me at the end of 2017, hey, you should start a podcast. So for me, I'm podcasting because I have the encouragement of my friends telling me, hey, go podcast, which is interesting because some of the same people told me to podcast, some of the same people don't download, but that's another story. Another story. And
you should call them out.
Yeah, you should download the podcast, especially if you told me that, the podcast.
Yes.
Why would you not do that, right? So, but yeah, so I took that encouragement and I started podcasting. And then I sat down and said, well, what am I going to podcast about? And I realized that all the experiences of working in church and ministering and articulating what we call the human experience, for however you define that, but just that cliche of life as a person living. I thought I had a way of being able to do that would be interesting and provocative, and also help create the stories that I wanted to tell by finding people who had their story and giving them a platform to tell it. So, I took all of that gumbo, the ministry experience, the vulnerability, the technology background as a software person, right, and the computer guy, and I put all that together to form Culture and Conversation.
Awesome. So, and you've had some pretty interesting interviews. I won't, how I feel about your insecure interview. I'm still, feeling slightly salty.
Episode 13.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a great person. However, she
Yeah.
just played her role way too well.
I know.
Way too well.
Yeah.
But I won't get
into that. Yeah. No. Team Tasha. I'm still Team Tasha. So I can actually say this. Shout out to Dominique Perry, who was episode 13 on Culture and Conversation.
Shouts out to her. But you a good man. Oh, it drives me crazy. I cannot. Okay, I'm sorry, but that just touches me in a place that I don't like.
That's why it's provocative.
It is, and it shouldn't be. But she did an outstanding job on that because everyone knows Natasha.
Everybody relates to that.
Yeah, and you had Squat Bay, which I thought was neat.
Yeah, Squat Bay. Yeah, shout out to Kaylin ELISA. Yeah, she was. I think she's episode 38 now. Yeah, the woman. The episode's called Kaylin ELISA is the woman behind Squat Bay. Yeah, because I was like, what happens when you become a meme? Like, and you think about like some of the show topics I've done, where we see memes every day. Mm-hmm. But when's the last time you heard an interview with somebody who's actually a meme? When have you heard?
Right. Never.
Yeah. Never. What was the magic behind that? Was it truly just this moment? Did you try to become a meme? Were you intentional about this? How did it happen? What was the goal? What was it? And it just turned out to be totally innocuous. It's just something that just happened. So, and then on top of that, then you find out what her experience is like. Now that she is a meme, what is that like? I thought it was really telling, for instance, where she talked about being at a friend's wedding and she didn't want to upstage her friend. You know what I mean? Like that's real. I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. She can't just go around. She just kind of she doesn't want to be low key because she's a celebrity, quote unquote, but she is trying to be respectful of people in certain moments because she doesn't want that meme to just spark up.
Right. She's like the Beyonce of her own life.
Of her own life. Yeah. Yeah.
So who's the big person or that you want to have on your podcast?
Oh. I don't have anybody that's just I'm clamoring to talk to. I think I'm just more in love with being a storyteller. So if you've got a good story to tell, then I'll talk to you on my podcast. If I can find the angle that I feel like needs to be discussed and expressed, I'll talk to you on my podcast. But to say like I'm targeting somebody, I can't say I am. Because what happens is what I've experienced because of these people I've had a chance to talk to, like a Dominique Perry, like a Tristan J. Winger, who plays Thug Yoda on Insecure as well.
Name drop.
People I've had a chance to talk to, and some of these conversations I've had a chance to have, you realize that there's this layer between me and the rest of us normal people and quote unquote celebrity. And it's hard to pierce, and it's a little bit interesting to pierce. So with that, I don't necessarily want to chase that because it's so much work just to get through that veil into these spaces where you can get people on your podcast, and then there's this idea of do you give enough value to them for them to spend 30 minutes of their time talking to you?
What's in it for them?
What's in it for them, right? And I think that's the part of that industry that I'm not really a fan of. So I try to be led by the story more so than by this name or this person, because at the end of the day, people still have to care about what I'm saying in terms of the podcast is Jamison Smallwood on Culture and Conversations. And so I don't have anybody in particular, but sure, I mean, if you just, if I'm just throwing names out there, I think it'd be cool to talk to somebody like, maybe like Oprah, sit down and talk to Bill Gates, talk to him about technology, talk to just, maybe, I'm trying to get Pastor Troy on the podcast. I got his number in my phone.
Listen, if you get Pastor Troy, I may need to be here. Let me work your microphone. He was such a part of my high school career.
But think about it. You think about somebody like Pastor Troy, for instance. When's the last Pastor Troy interview you heard where people don't get me wrong, he's done interviews.
Yeah.
But when's the last style of interview where the type of interview I do that you heard him do?
Never.
Never.
I feel like every time I've heard him on an interview or something, it's like he's being a parody of himself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like he's being that crunk person on Ain't No More Playing GA.
Yeah.
But he's not really being
Micah.
That's
Troy.
his name?
Yes, his name Micah Troy.
Oh, thank you, James. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was going to say Pastor.
No. That's good, right? Pastor. You could be Pastor Micah. I want him to tell his story. You know what I mean? Like, I want him to hear us talk about how his music penetrated Morven, Georgia. The first day I heard No More Playing GA. He needs to know that because he doesn't. Exactly. That's it. Oh man, I was trying to think of one of his lyrics.
Or vice versa.
Exactly, vice versa. Or Champion. When I heard that song and heard the Goldberg music, I'm like, this is what's been missing from my life. He doesn't. I say this respectfully, about him because I don't know him, but I just say respectfully. I didn't get a chance to meet him. That's I guess number and all that stuff. So yeah, it was smooth though. But I put it this way: the woman he was talking to, there was no way I was gonna get his attention. I'm like,
the boom and the pow. You can't compete with the boom and the pow.
No. I was like, I see you, Troy. You still got it, brother. I see you. Lord, that's all I can say. And but whenever you heard him talk to somebody, I'm not saying I'm some I'm not saying I'm Oprah, but whenever you heard him talk to an intelligent person who can help him tell that story or at least can convey that emotion, that experience in the way that I try to do it on Culture and Conversations. You
can have Pastor Troy unsung.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Like he needs to hear it because he doesn't. I don't think he understands. He hears from people telling him all the time they love his music, but I don't think he understands like what his career meant to hip hop in general. I think Magic Johnson would be cool to talk to as well.
Do you have enough tape for that? I feel like Magic Johnson talks real slow.
That's cool. That's the thing about a podcast. I can chop it up a bunch of ways.
Speed it up a little.
Speed it up, yeah.
Okay. What is so? That's 3, 4.
Yeah. So that was Les, Oprah, Bill Gates, Magic, and you know what? I'm gonna say this one. I'd like to talk to my dad on my podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should do that. You know how NPR they have their StoryCorps stuff. I think you should interview your dad on StoryCorps. Like anyone can do that. You should check into it. I think that's fun. I say I want to do my grandma, but I think you should interview your dad on that. So do both. And
I might try that.
Like they put it in a vault, and so it's just there forever.
Yeah. I might try that. So we'll see.
I'm surprised you don't have any food people on there.
I mean, food is really a hard thing to communicate through podcast medium. Even though I do like Small Bites, a bonus show I do where I go around and review restaurants and talk about my sort of lifestyle stuff I do. And that's more of the vlog or what was it, vlogging podcast, blogging or whatever you call it. I think I'm gonna coin that phrase, plogging. I don't have anybody in the food. None of these chefs really. I love chefs. I think they're dope. I did have one person on my podcast. He was really cool. The
macaroni and cheese place.
Yeah, Ashley. Yeah, She was really cool. She goes by Foodie Cutie on Instagram. So her poached salmon, I've got to try that sometime. The poached salmon.
Sounds delightful.
Yeah, it was epic. It almost got to be X-rated. I was like, "What is this salmon? What's in this salmon?" So, you know, but that's one of the funniest parts about the podcasting experience and talking about interviewing people is that you have to keep it engaging and entertaining, and at the same time, you know, you don't want to come off as creep. I don't want to be some guy, with like breathing into a microphone, So tell me the next thing about yourself that is so yeah. Give your wooden spoon, yeah, like
Good idea. Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. And that's one of the things that's part of what goes into soliciting people to be on the podcast too. Is like everything fits into that. How did I approach them? How did I reach out to them? What did I say to them in my opening email? How did I present myself? And I think that's big because it really, you don't ever want to send that factor, that vibe out there. I hate the word vibe, but I get it. It's in circulation. You don't want to ever give anybody that trigger that, oh, this guy's a creep. Mm-hmm. This podcasting thing isn't real. It's just a front.
Speaking of being a creep or not being a creep.
Okay.
So Jamison, you're home alone.
Okay.
Smallwood Manor.
Yeah, Smallwood Manor. Yes.
What would people be surprised that you do G-rated version?
Okay. When I'm home alone?
When you're home alone.
Man, that's a good question.
Guilty pleasures, random hobbies.
People know I cook. People on the podcast might not know I cook, but they will at some point because I'm sure there's a cooking show. Maybe culture in the kitchen.
Yeah,
something like that.
We could have done that today.
I know. So people know I garden a little bit, but that's something that I do. Do handyman stuff for certain jobs around the church and at my house.
What's the last handyman project that you did?
The last one is I rebuilt the staircase, or repaired the staircase, I should say, at my church.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't think there are a lot of people in our age range who are handy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You're like a unicorn.
That skill is kind of lost.
It is.
But then it's the same part of my brain that does the engineering work, software engineering stuff. It's the exact same part of my brain, except for I have the tactile piece of it where I'm actually manipulating real elements. So instead of me manipulating code, I manipulate wood and screws and nails and all that stuff.
So do you think you could ever be Jamison the carpenter? I know you said your dad was a carpenter. Is a carpenter. It's
really hard work. Like it's such hard work. But now I will say this: him as a carpenter, I guarantee you, he felt more accomplished more often than I do, because so many software engineering projects fail. So you don't get that high of starting something, seeing it become, and then seeing it finished, and then sitting back saying, "Man, I built that." You don't get that as often. He got that all the time, but I didn't get that often. I don't get that often. So he has houses he drives by, and he's like, "Yeah, we built that house." Like, what I like the whole house. Even the house we grew up in, he built. From scratch. Yeah, took out a $5,000 loan, and he bought $5,000 worth of building materials, put the rest of it together, and then built the house we lived in.
That is insane.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody today can do that. Well, I mean, like our age, I don't think I'm gonna meet a man who's my age who's like, yeah, building this house from scratch.
Yeah, no mortgage.
That is crazy.
No mortgage. He took out $5,000 loan and built a house from nothing.
That's fantastic.
So, but things I do for fun around the house in my spare time. Well, I think people know now I do write poetry still, even though it's very rare. I still write a little bit of poetry.
I remember that from college.
Yeah. And if there's an episode of Culture and Conversations, there's a couple episodes where you can hear some poetry. 2 episodes, I believe. So, yeah. But, yeah, that's what I do in my spare time. I mean, I'm a pretty normal guy. It's just, I try to take care of my home, I don't have a lot of spare time with the stuff I do at church, and then working out and trying to work out, and yeah. So yeah, I think that's about the most spicy it gets. I'm still pretty,
Real tang, real wholesome.
yeah,
I can appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, life is easier to live that way for me. It is. I have fun. Don't get me wrong. I got a spicier side to me, but at the same time, it's just in terms of my day to day life, it doesn't come out that much.
Okay.
But I do enjoy tequila. So
yeah. Tequila. Yeah. Oh damn.
So
I can't drink it.
Tequila,
unless it's in a margarita.
Yeah, I mean, I drink a lot of margaritas.
Okay. Yeah. So what would happen for you to say, okay, I feel like I've made it? Or do you feel like you've made it?
Oh, man. I think it would take, I don't know, like, so this is the new quandary for me. I think as we bring this conversation to an end, is what does it mean to make it? So this podcast, right? It'd be cool if the podcast had a very good listenership, a good audience, where it was a self-sustaining podcast, so that the audience felt good enough about culture and conversations where it would, the audience would patronize it and pay for certain pieces of it. Mm-hmm. And then that would give me the ability to kind of, take that and kind of begin to broaden it a little bit. That'd be great. Now, in terms of other, people have asked me other things, like maybe this leads me to making other content, which would be dope. Creating other, pieces of content and putting out. And I've started a company called Smallwood Media Productions. So all of this stuff fits underneath that. Okay. So right now it's a labor of love. It's a lost leader, as they would say in business. Nothing is coming from it monetarily, but that's cool. I'm not doing it for that because I don't want people thinking that I did culture and conversations to make money. Mm-hmm. That's not why I did it. My other job pays me well, so making money from culture and conversations isn't what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is build something that is a source of intellectual, emotional, social, and on some level, though it's not the emphasis, a spiritual treasure chest that's in the podcast format. Part of me having these conversations is that I get to talk to people about things I'm really curious about. So I've got an interview coming up with a friend tomorrow who is a prosecutor. And here he is, African-American man in South Georgia who's a prosecutor. He is one of the guys who determines what happens to you, how, hey, are we going to prosecute you or even go through the trouble of trying to lock you up? He has a lot of say in that. And for me, I'm interested in his perspective. I'm interested in what inputs he takes into his mind when he looks at situations and circumstances of people to come out with a decision of, hey, we're going to prosecute this guy. Is there any leniency? Is there any grace there? Curious about that. All of that story of becoming, even your story about you did on your episode, you talked about working at my sister's place in Gainesville, Georgia, and helping women who are homeless and dealing with these brutal transitions in their life. That to me, that's gold. Where did that come from? How do we get our people, our kids, our children, other adults to understand that? How do we highlight that? How do we show that? Because I think that's the thing about culture and conversations is that everybody has a great story if they just tell it. And I think that also in the age of cell phones and everybody using Snap, Twitter, Instagram, Facebooky things to communicate, people don't talk anymore. And that's part of what, to me, if people find value in that, again, because of culture and conversations, then I'll feel like I've made it in the podcast. In terms of professional work, like what pays the bills and keeps Smallwood Manor running, quote unquote, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm on a good trajectory where I can make money in the next decade, save money in the next decade, and be strategic about getting ready to one day to possibly retire, down the line. I think the next decade sets up very well for me. I've got some really interesting avenues that I can explore with other larger companies who are out there, and I've interviewed with some of them, and I'm learning that process of trying to get through those interviews and work my way through that stuff. So possibly that might be something. But I'm at a place where I'm not motivated by money anymore. And
That's a good point.
it's, don't get me wrong, I have to still work for money, but I'm not chasing the mythical dollar amounts anymore that I used to have written down, thinking that, if I just made this, then I'll be happy. I made it, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm happy. And then I kept saying, well, okay, there's no, I don't need to make any, I can't make any more, and I made more. So I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm just like, okay, making more money doesn't do it for me. Obviously, I've got that experience of making more. That doesn't fulfill me. So career-wise, I think what my goal is, to go back to what I said about my father, I want to build things and look back at it and say, I built that. And even in technology, it's such a brutal space because nothing has permanence. Everything is always being replaced. Innovation is always, being, strived after. So you don't get to see your stuff last that long. But it would be nice to have made some mark in technology where people look back on it and say, oh, Jamison made that. I remember when that was the thing, even if it was only for like 5 years, which is the eternity in technology. So I think for me to feel like I've made it would be when I have more of a legacy kind of thing accomplished. And I think right now, not to sound arrogant, but I think I'm at a point where I can start thinking about the on-ramp to building a legacy. I think I've been just laying the groundwork and getting some tools in place to begin to think about building a legacy. So now I think that's the next step for me, is to be more intentional in maybe the next decade, the next 20 years of life, to start thinking about legacy and pouring out into people. And I think that all that comes full circle to this whole venture of creating media around my life in some way where people can have it and they can say, oh wow, this guy, he gave us this of himself. Whether it's a technology accomplishment, whether it's a great set of interviews or something motivational I put out on the internet, whatever, it's all of that fits into that umbrella. And I don't think I have to compromise myself to do it. So I'm cool with chasing that experience and seeing what that will be like.
Awesome. Well, one last question. I'm sort of circling back a bit. When we were talking about in college, you said you didn't really do internships, and possibly having a mentor may have helped you. You know, you were just sort of this unique person, and so you were just sort of doing your own thing. But I'm confident there are other younger Jamisons coming up.
Okay.
Have you thought about mentoring, or are you a mentor? Is that something you're interested in? That's a part of building a legacy.
Yeah, I think replication is the one of the signs of maturity in all areas of life, whether it's biological, whether it's spiritual, whether it's professional. You want to replicate. So yeah, I'm open to mentorship, and I have time to do it. I think it's challenging because there are people. I do a little bit of that professionally. I get a taste of that sometimes when we have like a junior developer come in, and but in terms of our community, I would love to do more of that. That's a goal I have of something I want to do, is start working more with kids who want to have interest in technology. It's not easy as it sounds, because part of being a mentor is building the relationship, sometimes top down instead of bottom up. A lot of times we look for mentees who are going to be more aggressive about coming up to us and pursuing us. And I know I'm guilty of that at times, but sometimes you have to reach down and say, okay, okay, I know you don't know how to build this relationship. I'm going to just do it for you, and we're going to do this together, and I'm going to pour into your life. So, yeah, we'll see. If there's somebody who wants to, give some time to learning about software and learning how to put together a podcast, and just all the things that I've learned and the mistakes I've made and the experiences, and take that wisdom from it. Yeah, I'm open to that. So I'm able to do that right now. In this part of my life, because I don't have a lot of the things that a lot of people have to deal with, at this stage of life. So I'm cool. I'm free and flexible to do those things. So.
Awesome. I think you should pursue that. So I'm interested. I'm going to push you towards that.
Okay.
I'm going to be a pusher.
Okay.
We're going to find you a mentee.
Okay.
So this will be good.
You're not going to be pusher T. You're going to be pusher D. Yes.
I'm here for that.
Yeah. Nice.
I feel like I need to put that on Instagram or something. That's my new Instagram. Pusher D.
That's it. Yes.
Thank you, Jamison. That was a jewel. I'm going to use that.
This is what happens on the Culture and Conversation podcast. Episode 1 of the Sit Down.
Yes. Well, this has been fun, Jamison. I have enjoyed interviewing you.
Cool.
I'm glad you let me do this.
You got me to be open about some things and reflective on some things. So it turned out to be good. So